The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to episode 15 of DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery After Party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me, as always, my favorite Gorn and my favorite Jeff, my co-host Jeff Hewlett. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to still be racking up the favorites.
Yeah. I'm not sure. You need to come up with a new cosplay if you want to be another kind of favorite,
man.
I guess.
Well,
So
I got a few months before STLV to think one up, right?
A few, less than 6 at this point.
Wow.
But we're not here to talk about cosplay. We're here to talk about Star Trek Discovery. For those who aren't familiar with the podcast, we're a community-based Star Trek discotheque of sorts, focusing on each episode of Star Trek Discovery as they air. Tonight, we'll be discussing episode 15, the season finale, Will You Take My Hand? With us to talk about the episode are two members of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook, which is the exclusive gateway to gain admission onto the show. Our first guest is he heads up our Las Vegas strip run, which I will never do because even though it's in the morning when it's not too hot, I hate running. However, I commend him. He is our friend Eric Profancik. Hi, Eric. How are you?
I am well. Hi, Heather. Hi, Jeff. Hello, everyone.
We're happy to have you, and I'm glad I don't have to do any running on this podcast.
Oh, come on. I would make you do the strip run next year. It's a great thing.
I'll have to train. We'll see. I might be able to do it someday, but I don't know about this time. All right. Our other guest, our great friend, Gregor Cameron. Gregor, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you from the other side of the pond.
Oh, hi, Heather. Thanks for having me. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone.
Oh.
We're going to hop into our discussion of episode 15 in just a moment, but first we have some announcements from Jeff and I. As we mentioned, DiscoTrek is a community-focused podcast evolved from our desire to give fans in our convention community a way to talk about Discovery. Although the season has ended officially, DiscoTrek will continue at least for a while. So for your chance to join us, make sure you're a member of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. Once you do that, you'll see a new post every Tuesday with the DiscoTrek image and information on the following week's recording time. Just comment on that post to be entered, and we'll use a random generator to pick 2 winners the following Saturday. Once you've been on the podcast, you can't enter again, but there are still ways to be part of the discussion. Jeff, do you want to remind people how they can do that?
Of course. Well, I'm not sure how this is going to work now that the season's over, but I assume we're still going to post in the unofficial group a thread for the next upcoming episode that you can comment on to have your comments potentially read on the show. And there's another way to get in touch with us. You can call our voicemail box at 609-512-LLAP. That's 5527, and leave up to a 2-minute voicemail message for us that we can play live on the show. And we have one that we're going to play at the end of tonight's episode by one of our former guests from one of our previous episodes.
Woohoo! Exciting. So we also have a Patreon account. We love our patrons, and we got some new patrons this past week. So Jeff, do you want to tell us all about them?
Oh my God, we got 3 this week, you guys. Thank you so much. We've got our wonderful friend from the land down under, Jamie McGregor. It was great to meet you and your sister at the convention this past year. And thank you so much for contributing to our show. One of the hosts from our newest show, Reading Trek, Marty Ali, is now a Patreon supporter as well. Thank you, Marty. We love you and William, and we love your new show. You guys are doing a bang-up job. Everybody, listen to Reading Trek. If you haven't listened to it yet, these guys are amazing. And finally, one of our prior DiscoTrek guests, our good friend Polly Esther, is also now a Patreon supporter. So all 3 of you guys, thank you so much for your support of our shows and our network.
Awesome. So now that we've got all that out of the way, it's almost time to talk about Discovery. Please keep in mind that from this point forward, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't watched the episode, what are you doing? Go watch it. Come back and listen when you've done that. Our show is a general discussion about the episode, but we do have 3 segments. They are Drop the Record, which is our opening remarks and reaction to the episode, Play a New Track, where we explore what we learn that's new about the Star Trek universe, and Spin It Again is our look back at standout moments, scenes, characters, or just about anything you feel is worth a second glance. All right, so Black Alert, let's get this going and drop the record. So, season finale, lots of mixed reactions that I've seen across social media.
Mm-hmm.
So, Eric, what did you think about this episode?
Well, I have to say I was not impressed, unfortunately. I'm one of the dissenting opinions and just was very disappointed by how they wrapped it all up. There was just, to me, entirely too much talking, lacking a little bit in action, but I am happy with the final resolution in that there was a good, solid Federation peaceful finale to the war. And despite the way the episode started with Giorgio and her mirror universe ways.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely feel you there. Gregor, what about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a good but not a great episode of Discovery. I think there's been stronger episodes. I would echo somewhat what Eric has said in that they've crammed a lot into this last episode, and everything just felt a little bit rushed and a little bit condensed. I think it would have been a better story over 2 episodes. And a little bit disappointed there wasn't a space battle. I think given the scale of the story and the visuals that we'd seen up to then, to have it sort of the end of the Klingon War just be 5 people in a cave talking it was quite disappointing. So.
Man, yeah. So Jeff, what's your opinion?
Well, I guess they answered my question about whether or not they could wrap it up in 1 episode. Some of the parts of the resolution felt, as Gregor said, a little bit rushed to me. I agree completely that it would have felt better if they spaced it out maybe over 2 episodes and had a little bit more of a feeling of suspense in there. And there was a couple things that happened that I really didn't understand the reasoning behind, which I'll bring up a little bit later. I guess the overall wrap-up of the Klingon War storyline pretty much measured up to what I was expecting it to be. I mean, you knew Burnham was the beginning and she had to be the end, and I was kind of glad that she had the olive branch moment, because I wasn't really sure exactly what they were going to do to make some sort of peace with the Klingons, but it still felt a little bit open-ended to me. It didn't feel totally final, and I'm still kind of left wondering how we get from where this left off to the Klingons serving on Federation ships. I'm still kind of scratching my head at that. But the actual ending to the episode really wasn't a cliffhanger per se. I was kind of expecting more of a cliffhanger, and I'm not really in an oh my god what's going to happen place. More of a wondering who we're going to see on the bridge of the Enterprise. With the
what we see the Enterprise. No, just kidding.
I don't know. I because we are technically, according to the timeline, although it is confusing, but the official timeline, so we are 2+ years past the cage. So very possible that Spock's on the ship. So that's kind of where my head's at. Are we going to explore Pike's timeline or time at the helm of the Enterprise? I'm not really sure where it's going. I like the premise. I'm hopeful for the next season, mostly because with Burnham's speech about being explorers, or that little bit about being explorers, coupled with the appearance of the Enterprise, I'm kind of optimistic we may get some kind of a partial return to the exploratory Star Trek that we all kind of miss from the past.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm pretty much in the same camp as everyone, and I'm glad that I'm not alone in how I feel about the episode. Overall, I'm satisfied with the ending, and I'm kind of glad. I feel terrible saying I'm glad it's over. That's a terrible thing to say. I think I'm just glad that we've wrapped up so much, but I was expecting the season finale to be like at least an hour and a half.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and not it was like 45 minutes or something, which really shocked me. And I like to me, I think I would have rather I don't know. It's tough. It's tough because I don't know. I'm satisfied with how it ended. I just felt that it was rushed. I felt
Mm-hmm.
that there were a lot of loose ends and a lot of things done that I just didn't quite agree with, like
Yep.
with letting Mayor Giorgio just walk away.
Uh-huh. That's
Um,
one of mine.
yeah, it's tough because as far as the ending goes and seeing the Enterprise, like I was really excited because look, I love Star Trek and I that kind of stuff like well, first of all, we met the Enterprise in David Mack's novel Desperate Hours. So having already read that book, this wasn't much of a surprise. I wasn't expecting it so soon, but it didn't like completely shock me. So like I was excited on one hand, like while giving it side eye, because again, you know, we've done so much to really help this show stand on its own and establish its own identity. And on one hand, okay, great, now we're tying it into the Prime universe this way, but at the same time, like I don't really care about seeing Spock. You know, Pike is kind of cool. I definitely want to see number one, whose name is Una, because she's just every girl wants to see more of her. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, what are we gonna see? Are we gonna see Spock? I know that on After Trek, Alex Kurtzman said that there are still questions that need to be answered, and one of those is the whole connection with Spock there. So it does look like they're gonna tie that up. But I thought it was really interesting because I did a poll on Twitter asking how people rated the season finale, and like overall, I think it was 60 something percent liked it and were satisfied and gave it an A. So it seems like most people were happy with it, but majority still seems to think that it was a little slow, could have been done over 2 episodes, needed to be a bit more fleshed out. Basically,
Why don't we
what
do a
we've all
letter
said.
grade thing here now for all four of us and see what we all think, letter grade wise?
Okay.
I'll start. I'll give it a B minus maybe.
Yeah, I think I'd probably also give it a B. Eric, what about you?
I'd skew towards B minus because, again, going back to my point, is just entirely too much talk for 45 minutes. Just, you know, how do you honestly stop a war with two fairly lackluster speeches? So
Yeah. Yeah. Gregor?
Yeah, I'd give it a B or a B minus. You know, and I think yes, the talk and no action thing, and in terms of what you said, Heather, about it not being very satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that was for me the Burnham exchange where she's persuading Cornwell, sorry, not to blow up the Klingon homeworld and about Starfleet values. And I think there's the episode of TNG called Pen Pals.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, there's a fantastic scene in that where the crew are debating the merits of the Prime Directive and whether they should help the little girl on the planet. And it's beautifully written. Every member of the bridge crew has something to say in the piece. It lasts about 5 minutes, and it really does get you thinking about the Prime Directive. Whereas when Burnham was debating with Cornwell, while it looked great, it was punchy, it didn't have that intellectual depth that a subject like that should have had. That's what I feel.
You know, I agree with that 100%. And it's one of my it's something that I will probably talk about when we do like our retrospective for the season. But as much as I like the speeches that we've had, like when I was sitting down and writing Saru's speech from what episode was that? Past his prologue, I guess.
2 episodes ago.
Like, you know, when I'm watching it, I'm moved. I'm emotional. I'm moved, and that's part of because I'm watching Star Trek, and we're seeing the cast, the acting is a huge part of what delivers for me. But like when you take a step back and actually look at the speeches and what's being said, like they don't have the depth that we had in previous Star Trek. And that's definitely something that I'm missing from Discovery, and I hope that they can get I would say get back to, but can get to in season 2.
I thought, now, weren't we just supposed to have 13 episodes? So these last 2 were the like bonus episodes, and that being the case, again, I found both of these just really didn't work in wrapping up the war. So it's like, you know, they've said they've worked their way backwards. They knew they were going to have the war and how they were going to resolve it. So they knew their ending, and this is what they thought of and based an entire show out of. It just, you know, seems a little odd considering the strength of the rest of the season.
It's almost like I was going to say earlier, I almost would have rather left it with past his prologue, because that episode was just so powerful. There was so much going on. And then these last 2 episodes were just super, super quiet compared to it. And in some respects, I think that these 2 episodes very much work together. But even in that, like, it's still just not quite enough to end this war. Yeah,
I mean, I think, was it Jeff or Eric that mentioned, or yourself, Heller, about there not being a cliffhanger? You think about the end of what's past this prologue, when Mirror Giorgio walks onto the bridge to take over the Discovery. That was a cliffhanger. Yep. That's where they could have left it.
Yeah, I agree.
I disagree. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I disagree. I'm not a fan of cliffhangers. I mean, best of both worlds. I mean, that is just, you know, the pièce de résistance of cliffhangers. And you're never going to live up to that. And they kept trying year after year after year in TNG. And just, I'm happy we have a firm resolution on Discovery.
Yeah.
And if I can just continue a little bit more, I guess I'm one of the 1% that didn't see the Enterprise coming. I wasn't expecting it, so I was surprised. But I don't want to see the adventures of the Enterprise again. This is Star Trek Discovery. We already have the original series, so let's not taint our memories and get the fan base all riled up about that. Let's leave well enough alone, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's tough because it's like, okay, well, this will maybe help appease some people that are worried about timeline and canon and all that fun stuff. I don't know. I mean, Star Trek fans are so divided over Discovery to begin with. I think ultimately, like, I would have been much more satisfied if this episode, as Gregor said, had more action, comparable to what's past as prologue, but with the resolution. And we'll move on to our other segments here in a minute, but there's so much to talk about that isn't necessarily what we learned that's new about the Star Trek universe. So I don't want to move on to play a new track yet. But one of the things that bothered me, you know, concerning the Klingon War, which we were told that this season was about the Klingon War. And for a while, I felt like it was. Like, we were getting updates on what was going on. We had a lot of interaction. You know, we had Takuma, who died, you know, by the second episode. But we had L'Rell, we had Voq, and we had Cole. So we had a lot more interaction with the Klingons. And I was really excited for what was going to happen with L'Rell. I felt like she was captivating. She was cunning. She seemed manipulative. She seemed like she had a plan. And I guess the plan was just to get onto Discovery and to use Voq to do that. Because once Ash Tyler came into play, I felt like L'Rell pretty much got left behind, to the point that once we go into the mirror universe, she's pretty much just forgotten in the brig until now we basically hands her the Klingon Empire. So it's like I figured she would be in this place by the end of the season, but I thought she would have earned it. Like, I thought she would have done it on her own, and I was really interested in that story. And instead, it's just handed to her. and then there's the resolution, and she's going to blackmail the Empire with the bomb. I just found that whole thing kind of disappointing and felt that L'Rell was really underutilized.
I felt the whole Klingon. I mean, the Klingons got kneecapped at every stress point. That I mean, you come back from the mirror universe, and all of a sudden, you realize, oh my God, the Klingons have taken over everything. We didn't get to see any of that happen, right?
No.
So I didn't feel the gravity of that I should have felt, and I felt like you had a lot of lead up with the L'Rell and Voq, storyline, and they kneecapped that too. And it just felt like, we were supposed to be having a Klingon war. I would have thought that a lot of the heavier, stressful moments of the series would have been focused on that. And they just didn't seem as impactful to me as they could have been or should have been.
Right. We never saw the war. We saw them begin the war. We saw them end the war. And outside of one battle to save that dilithium mine, we didn't see the war.
Nope.
I think that they should have just been truthful, and that Star Trek Discovery is really a story about Michael Burnham and Michael Burnham exploring her humanity with a lot of other people along for the ride. I don't want to completely discredit, all the other characters and everything that's going on. And especially the way that this episode wrapped up with Burnham talking to Amanda and saying, you told me never to lose my humanity, and I didn't get it, and now I do. And so in that way, we've come full circle. But I almost wish we never even went to the mirror universe, because those episodes could have all been focused on showing us the Klingon War and on showing us more about L'Rell and Tyler and what happens with them, because they were in love and had this whole relationship that we never really saw. And then I still don't understand what she did to him and how the personality of Voq is apparently gone, but he can still access his memories and stuff. Those are still questions for me.
Yeah, for me too. And you know what? I'll flip it around a little bit though, and I'll say that I would, if I had to pick and choose which episodes we could have scrapped in order to flesh out the actual story arc more, I probably would have kept the mirror episodes because they were really good in my opinion. I would have probably taken out the time loop episode and the episode on the planet with Saru losing his mind. I thought those two were interesting, but they really didn't serve the arc as a whole that much. And I felt like the pacing was really not what it should have been for this for the entire arc over the course of the season. But I was a little bit more happy with the mirror episodes from an action and interest standpoint.
I think the mirror episodes work as episodes in their own right. They're spectacular, and they're probably my favourite episodes in the whole series. But with hindsight, looking back at the whole series now, it seems that the mirror episodes were there merely to explain why Lorca was not your typical Starfleet captain.
And then Lorca died.
And I agree with you, Hela, in terms of the way L'Rell was used towards the end was quite disappointing, and I don't think it was L'Rell's way to hold the Klingon homeworld, to threaten it with a bomb at its core. That she would have been much more Machiavellian and getting power than that. And the Klingon War, we lost a lot of tension. The Klingon War never felt as desperate as the Dominion War or the Xindi.
Totally.
Nothing like it.
And it's like, again, we're used to having longer seasons, and when we have those long seasons and all those extra episodes, there's room for stories that are about the war, fleshing out the war, and then episodes that are more focused on character development, character story. And so something like the time loop one, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, like, at the end of the day, that episode really didn't need to be there. It's still one of my favorites. I thought it was a ton of fun.
Oh, me too.
But in a season that's only 15 episodes, that's something that probably doesn't need to be there. And it's difficult because I try to imagine if Discovery was, a 26 episode season and how much more we would have gotten. And the reality is, even for season 2, we're not going to get that kind of Star Trek again, because that's just not what TV is now. It's tough. I'm glad that for the most part, like, people were happy that things were wrapped up, or that there was a very distinct return to Federation ideals and saying this is what's true and we are Starfleet. But I guess we'll see. Do we want to go ahead and move it into Play a New Track?
Sure.
Okay, just since we're a little limited on time. So Play a New Track is where we explore what we learn that's new about the Star Trek universe. So Gregor, why don't you lead us for this segment?
Well, the one thing that I picked up on was that the Orions are the same in the Prime universe than they are in the Mirror universe.
They're just a little lighter skin tone, apparently, at least in the strip club.
Yeah, and Belloc is now an Orion as well. He's grown up into an Orion. Belloc.
He's evolved, and he still drinks Tranya, which I don't know about you guys, but we knew that Clint Howard, at least I remembered reading online that Clint Howard had been on set and that he was probably going to make an appearance. I completely forgot.
I forgot.
So when I saw him, like, I was so surprised, and I thought that's a really fun way to throw in a little fan service, a little Easter egg without it being too much.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and he was holding court in that sort of pub where they were as well, the way that Belloc was doing it as well, but only with some substances that Belloc probably wouldn't have touched.
Probably not.
That was a lot of fun. Eric, what about you?
A couple little random things. Sticking with the Orions, compared to their Enterprise counterparts, they've learned the dangers of steroids, and the men don't bulk up to 50 pounds of muscle anymore. They're now these little waifish twink Orions.
Oh.
So, then I thought the Klingon tattoos are pretty cool. You touch them and they glow and expand and do all kinds of funky stuff.
So that was I just sorry to interrupt you for a minute. That was a really neat scene, and a lot of people, I didn't notice it because I was just looking at the tattoos, but the woman getting tattooed was a Trill, and I don't know a lot about all of Dax's previous hosts and stuff, but supposedly she could be Emily Dax. So I guess we'll see. She fits all the criteria to be that character, but admittedly, I'm going to lose some Trek cred here. I just don't know a lot about the character to be like, yep, that's totally her. But I just thought I would point that out. So sorry to interrupt. No,
not at all. I was just going to go on to Klingons and saying, I guess the High Council now meets in a cave.
Yeah, right.
Kind of weird. I don't know. I kind of prefer an actual meeting area, but hey, if a cave works for you, why not? And then here, just to be a little more silly. I guess I've learned that perhaps based on seeing the original USS Enterprise, that this is yet not really the standard Prime universe, but an alternate universe, because it's not our classic Enterprise. It's been upgraded or tweaked just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I like it. I think it looks really cool. I didn't think there was too much done to it, that it was completely distracting.
No.
I thought she was pretty.
I don't think so. I think it looked more like the original Enterprise than the Kelvin movies Enterprise did.
Alrighty.
No, I was just going to say that I thought the Enterprise looked very similar to the motion picture Enterprise.
Good call. Yeah,
I think it does. I know that Tricorder has been, last night, was tweeting a whole bunch of like little tidbits, all the Easter eggs that popped up, like the SETI eels that were being fried, the Tranya with Clint's Orion. Did we learn what his character name was? I don't know. Yeah, on
IMDb it just says Shady Orion.
All right, well that works. But yeah, so Tricorder was doing stuff like that, and I think they also may have mentioned a couple like tie-ins on the ship design to motion picture to the original Enterprise, stuff like that. So I definitely recommend giving their Twitter a look-see for all that good stuff.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but all these little nods to fan service, while cute, I thought there was just entirely too many in this episode.
There were a lot.
A lot, Clint Black, just like you said, the Tranya, the SETI Alpha Eels, the Enterprise, new civilizations, the camera panned down through the dome at one point, I mean, just even Samir Georgiou is, it's all these just fan service moments, and that just, a lot of time, again, distracting you from what should be a resolution to the series, or, so.
Yeah, it was a lot. I definitely felt like this episode had the most of any episode we've seen so far. Even when they were trading the guns with the Orion woman, they were the Nausicaan, what were they, phasers or something? I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But that was another one. So there was definitely a lot of that stuff for sure. Jeff, what about you? Did you learn anything new?
I think one of my biggest new takeaways was hearing about the Klingon attack and the killing of Burnham's parents from her perspective.
Curse you. That was mine.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
We can continue to talk about it. I thought that was particularly gruesome, especially the Klingon sitting down at the table and eating their dinner after murdering her parents while she listened on from her hiding place. So that was particularly impactful for me. So
would have loved to have learned that, a few episodes ago. And give more development to her character instead of saving it for the last 20 minutes of the season.
So
I agree. It would have been, our character would have been greatly enriched if we'd known that earlier.
This is the funny thing. I mean, not really funny, but I'm watching it with a friend, and my friend had to get up and use the restroom. He's like, just keep watching it. No big deal. And it was that scene. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we already know this. And I paused it and waited for him to come back, and then told him, oh, well, she was just talking about how her parents died, which is what we already knew that. And no, I knew it because it was in Desperate Hours. So I had already read that and then completely forgotten that it wasn't disclosed in the actual show itself. So I thought that was really nice that they've explicitly said, David Mack himself, and then I think John Van Sitter's Ted Sullivan all said, the books are not canon, so don't take them as such. And then someone said, well, they're canon until they're not canon. Like they're canon until proven wrong. But I thought that it was really neat to see that kind of a tie-in between the book and the show. And I do agree it probably should have come, some time ago. But I'm sure it just, again, helped with this resolution between Michael and Tyler. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Was there anything else, Jeff, that you had?
Well, I had a note about the Orions, but we got that already. One other kind of throwaway line that I perked up at was the one about the Vulcans obtaining black market surveys of Kronos. I thought that was an interesting kind of sidebar that the Vulcans are interested in the layout and topography of Kronos, and we don't usually think of them as a warlike species. So it was an interesting choice. I mean, it would have been interesting if it was like the Federation getting black market surveys, but
Sarek was one of the ones greenlighting the genocide, basically.
It's true. Good
so point. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more. They were headed to Vulcan. Whether they ever make it to Vulcan, I guess we'll find out in season 2 about that. Yeah, so we kind of talked about my thing. I thought it was nice that they Stamets pointed out, I think towards the end of the episode, that the Federation was looking for a different way to run the spore drive. So they weren't going to use humans or tardigrades anymore to do that. So they were just warping to Vulcan. I thought that was poignant, since we've talked season long about the fact that we never hear about a spore drive again, and obviously they're not going to continue doing it when they have to almost kill beings to do that. And then, yeah, I had the Nausicaan phasers. I had the fact that at the end, when Burnham's doing the speech, if you kind of look in the background at the people, there are a lot of different uniforms, some that very much look like Cage era uniforms. And again, I think Tricorder was posting some pictures of that kind of stuff. And I guess since we had to see it and we're talking about Klingons, like, did they really need to show the Klingon ping with the 2 different peace streams? Like, I didn't even notice that part until people were talking about it online. I was like, okie dokie, I guess that's confirmed.
Well, we got to give you something for that subscription service that we're paying for here.
I guess so.
It's not your daddy Star Trek anymore.
It definitely, no, I said that in our very first episode. It's not your mama's Star Trek, and that is for sure. So let me see. I think that was kind of most of my notes on what we learned that was new. So let's go ahead and move into Spin It Again, which is our look back at standout moments, character scenes, anything you feel is worth a second glance. So Eric, what stood out to you the most in this episode?
Oh, the most? I got a list of about a dozen things. You gonna make me pick one?
Let's pick a few then. I mean, we've got time. We've got time that we can flesh some things out, because there's a lot to talk about in this episode. And I think, now is certainly a good chance. So it doesn't have to be a positive thing. It can be I mean, we try not to nitpick, but at the same time, we're all for constructive criticism and productive discussion. So.
Yeah, these are mostly little things. I mean, because as we've discussed, we're kind of disappointed with the episode. So some of the more positive things I liked was the very first words of the episode, previously on Discovery, were spoken in Klingon. I thought that was cute.
That was pretty neat.
And I think was it the next scene or very shortly after the Klingon fleet approaching Earth, I thought, oh, this is going to be good. We're building up some tension here. We're going to have a war. And then it goes to nowhere.
Yeah. That's where we saw Space Dock being built too. I forgot. I was going to mention that. They kind of, after that shot, when they zoom in on Earth, and you can see the Space Dock being built.
Was it a space dock? I thought it was some sort of satellite. But,
yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. But no, all the other Trekkies chimed in. It's Space Dock. Okay, go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Yep. Now I'm glad I still have my all access. I can go back and check some of these things out before I cancel. Oh, did I say that? And as always, any scene with Tilly she's just amazing. She's probably my favorite character of the season. She's just so mature beyond her years and just brings a maturity yet a level of levity to every scene she's in.
And innocence. I have decided that Tilly embodies the heart of Star Trek. She's the one that's always, I mean, Michael Burnham has a lot of compassion, yes, but Tilly is so compassionate towards everyone on the ship, including Ash Tyler, which we talked about last week. But it's not only does she have that compassion for everyone, she communicates. She speaks up. She sat down with Stamets when he was going through his issues. And regardless of the fact that I didn't like that she kind of pressured Burnham a little to talk to Tyler, it's she's still at least trying to get everyone to work together. And if that's not, the true spirit of Star Trek, I don't know what is. So I'm right there with you with props for Tilly. She was hilarious in this episode.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I remember her very first scene or two going, oh man, one of these characters, and she just proved me wrong. So very happy with that development.
Yeah.
I'll mention just one last thing, because I'm sure some of you guys have some of these points and I don't want to steal all the thunder. The whole opening dialogue with Michelle or Giorgio, sorry. It's great. I think we kind of like it. Her Terran ways and the way she's, interacting with Saru and being mean and all that. nastiness. But on the flip side, it's like, are the bridge crew clueless and have no idea? Like, we just came from the mirror universe. Could this be the mirror captain? Nah, she gets all grumpy now all of a sudden. Or is it, they don't care. It's like, okay, whatever Starfleet says. So
yeah,
that was kind of odd. They're a little smarter than that.
I think so too. I've heard that talked about, I think last week on some other podcasts. And I think that overall, we really need to give the bridge crew a bit more credit.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like they had more screen time and dialogue in the mirror universe as their mirror counterparts
Yep.
that they did the entire 15 episodes. And while in all of this series, we've had, our main crew and then some background crew or some secondary characters. And I mean, DS9 has the biggest cast and crew of, I think, all of the shows. But like, they told us with Pasta's prologue, like that whole scene was the bridge crew, the whole crew coming together. Everyone in the bridge crew had a line. Saru was uniting them all. And then now we're back to, oh, here's your award, Stamets. Here's your award, Saru. Here's your award, Tilly. The rest of you can all here's a cookie. They didn't get any recognition. And, it's like for the writers and for Ted Sullivan to make a point to say, well, we didn't utilize them because we were waiting for this moment and past this prologue. But now they've just kind of dropped the ball again. So again, like, I just really hope that we get to see more of them in season 2, because to me, they're part of the crew. Like they're essential crew members, and I'd like to get to know them better.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine earlier today about this very topic, and my friend was saying that they were disappointed that they had a hard time remembering the names of a lot of the people on the bridge crew. And I said, that's something that I kind of felt was lacking overall in Discovery. I mean, I understand that it was shifted, that, the main characters and even some of the ancillary characters were focused on, and they weren't necessarily the bridge crew. I get it was a different approach to Star Trek, and it's kind of a shift to get used to this new way of looking at a ship's crew, but I could definitely understand that perspective. And also, just to throw out there too, I did like that they gave a posthumous award to Culber, by the way. That was nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't you think even Culber was underutilized?
Oh, absolutely.
Character?
Oh, gosh.
Absolutely was.
That's a whole can of worms.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
Which we might be doing.
For sure. It's something that we'll definitely be revisiting in our retrospective. And I think we may do a few retrospective episodes, just since we have so many voices that want to participate. I've been pretty vocal about Culber the whole season, and just my personal struggle with the loss of his character. I am still, like, at this point, I can only be depressed and negative about something for so long, and I'm still unhappy about it. And while I think it's nice that they gave him the medal, like, that didn't redeem the fact that they killed him off
not at all.
They're adamant, especially Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz. They're just like, hang in there. So I'm going to have to hang in there for a year. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to at least instill some faith into some kind of redemption. However, I'm going to be really honest. One of the things that upset me a little bit about this episode was with Mir Georgiou. And, I love the fact that we get some bisexual representation, but unfortunately, in doing that, it falls into another trope of making the bisexual is always an evil character or a dirty character or something. And I know that's a trope that, again, not many people are familiar with. But it's just frustrating. And it's like, I know that these writers know better than that. And I just wasn't, I was like, really? Really? That was a little frustrating. But I I guess we'll wait and see what happens with Culber. That's kind of the best I can do right now.
Yeah, the only bisexual character I can think of that hasn't been portrayed as evil is Captain Jack from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, when I saw that scene, it's like, I wasn't thinking what you said, just the bisexuals are evil. It's just me going back to, here we go. We got to prove we're adult Star Trek again. So
yeah,
I didn't see the trope.
Too. We did get, I think Tilly said shit when she found out that there was a bomb and not the drone. She's like, shit, which I didn't even notice until I rewatched it with the closed captioning on there. But yeah, I'm not like, I don't think that we really need to have Orion slave women and men in every, like, to make that Star Trek. I get that the Orion slave woman is an iconic Star Trek character, and of course she's the one that makes it into the Pop Funko and the Barbies and all those kind of things. But I'd rather have a Tilly Barbie than an Orion slave man or woman Barbie. And it's something that, again, like, not everyone is going to catch that's how I interpret it. But it's just a very sad and common trope, right along with the whole kill your gays thing, which in my opinion, Culber still fits into. Like, you still have a gay couple that experienced a tragedy. And okay, I'm just, like I said already, just going to have to wait and see if that's redeemed at all. Jeff, did you have any more? I can't remember who we were with you, right?
Oh, no, we're on Eric.
Or we're on Eric. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. No, I'm going to stop there, but I'm just going to say one thing about Culber, and I'm going to celebrate his life in Vegas in August with my white medical Discovery cosplay.
Awesome.
All for you.
Hell yes.
Good
and
for you, man.
I hope that you get a photo with Wilson Cruz. Like, I will take the opportunity to say this, like, regardless of how I feel about decisions made in the writing, I adore all of these people, and
absolutely,
I adore and applaud Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz, especially because to this day they are still putting up with homophobic jerks.
Yep.
On Twitter, on social media, and that's disgusting. And until the day I die, I will defend them and the rest of the LGBT community and anyone who is an other. And I mean, Star Trek Discovery is a show about others. Like, we have a show that embodies us in a lot of different ways. And even if it wasn't executed in the best way, there's still that visibility. Like, there's still a gay couple in Star Trek now. And at least that has some meaning. And I will fight. I will be part of the Shroom army for as long as I live. Okay, sorry.
Wait, did you say Shroom army? I haven't heard that one before.
Yes, that's kind of a new one that I made on Twitter a while back. I think it was either after the episode where they had their first kiss. I think that's what it was, because immediately tons of us were like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then there was a lot of pushback from homophobic bigots. And I watched Anthony and Wilson deal with that. And really the entire crew, like, everybody, all that, the cast, the writers, there are lots of LGBT people involved in Star Trek Discovery. And I think that any of that pushback is experienced by everyone involved. And so I started tagging stuff with Shroom Army. All right. Well, Gregor, what about you? What do you think deserves a bit of a shout out?
Well, like Eric, there was so many moments. Some of them were too brief. For example, the exchange between Cornwell and Burnham that we spoke about earlier. I think that could have been a much bigger interchange between those two characters, or indeed in bringing Saru into that one as well, I think. But I did enjoy the scene, I have to say. There were some really funny moments. Tilly telling Burnham she was high was funny. We spoke about the Clint Howard Easter egg, the Giorgio's Bread and Circuses reference, but the thing that I just cannot get out my head, and coming back to the bisexual element, is what did Mirror Giorgio teach those Orion slave girls? That's what I want to know. Can't stop thinking about it.
Good point.
Oh goodness. I'm kind of
slave girls something they don't know. Then it really must be something.
I'm glad we didn't have to see it though. I don't. Yeah. And hey, they had like most of their clothes on. Mira Giorgio had on her corset, I guess, but aside from some thong action, it was pretty PG-13.
Yeah, at least there was boy butt and girl butt this time for everyone.
Yeah. Butts for all.
Butts for everyone.
It's interesting when Ira Stephen Bear wrote Captain's Holiday and he took it into Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry wanted men kissing men in the background and women kissing women in the background, and he wanted to quite heavily imply that level of sexual freedom. Mm-hmm. And he approved it, and then Rick Berman had said to Ira Stephen Bear, just go and make sure Picard gets a girl. That's all we need to worry about.
Yeah.
But 30 years ago, that's where Roddenberry wanted to take the show. So it was, I agree with you, Heller, in terms of bisexuals are bad, and it's still not perhaps the representation that the community would want, but I think it's getting there.
It is. I really think that it is, and I'm happy that in this day and age, the people, the big money people and censors are not as strict as they used to be, because Star Trek has done a really great job of tapping the glass ceiling. I know we talk about the glass ceiling a lot with women's rights, but just in general, like with episodes like Rejoined, DS9's Rejoined, where we have Dax kissing Lenara Khan, and so it's the first lesbian kiss, but in that episode, and it's a great episode. It was definitely a very brave episode for its time, but they still had to explain, and explicitly explain that this was originally a heterosexual relationship. So explain it that way. And like even all the way back to TOS and the first interracial kiss with Kirk and Uhura, that was a forced kiss. So Star Trek has a really strong history of kind of pushing boundaries, but there's still some padding to make it acceptable in air quotes.
Well, one has to wonder, what would it have been like if the first interracial kiss on Star Trek had happened as planned, as part of the alternative factor? Wound up getting cut. It was supposed to be Lazarus and Uhura were supposed to have the first interracial kiss, and it wouldn't have been forced. Interesting that it wound up being in Plato's Stepchildren and being a forced kiss between Kirk and Uhura.
Because that's what can make it on TV, and that didn't even make it in the southern states. And now, now we have an explicitly gay couple, a beautiful, wonderful couple, and one half may be dead right now, but we have that representation. And I do have to applaud Discovery for also having other gay characters in the background. Like there were two women in Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, which I feel like I should get points every time I reference that episode, since this is like the third time I've said it tonight. But in the background of that episode, there were two women dancing together. So that dream of Roddenberry's, is coming alive in Star Trek, and having that visibility, just having those characters living their normal lives in the background.
Baby steps. Yep.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. We haven't even mentioned the TNG episode. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one with Riker and
the Outcast.
The Outcast. That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Even in that one, although the species were meant to be androgynous, the actor that played the character Riker fell in love with was a woman, and it would have been much braver if it had been a man playing
And
that
he
role.
wanted it. He wanted it to be a man.
Yeah.
Craig specifically requested that, and they didn't do it. And I understand why those decisions were made, and that's why I think it's important to remember, even with Discovery, there are still people beyond the actors, the writers, the producers, beyond that, there are still people above them that have influence on the show and decide what happens. And that's kind of why I said, even with the Culber's death and it falling into the barrier gauge trope, and then, Aaron Harbert's, Anthony Rapp, Wilson Cruz, everyone came out right away to defend it and then kind of applaud it and talk about how GLAAD supported it. And I think that, ultimately that, this is their job. And so they kind of also have to do these things. And there may have been influence from the higher ups on how this story is going to work out. Like, let's split up these characters so that we can continue into the second season. Who knows? But it's
there's always the hope that the spore that landed on Tilly's shoulder is childbirth.
That's what I heard.
No, I was just gonna say, was the green spore is gonna just grow inside of Tilly or something?
Oh, Lord!
Oh God, please no!
I don't.
Are we gonna give birth to a new Culber?
Oh, please no spore immaculate conceptions.
Yeah, my theory on the spore is that it's Lorca, actually, because they used the when they blew up the core of the Emperor's ship that was powered by this spore reactor type thing. Lorca fell into that.
I don't think that the possibility of seeing Prime Lorca is off the table. So that's something that I'd love to see, especially now that I'm reading the other Star Trek Discovery book, Drastic Measures by Dayton Ward, which is essentially about Prime Lorca and Prime Giorgio. And so he's a different character, and I'd like to see him sometime in season 2, but we'll see. I don't know. Again, I'm just going to sit back and trust that they've got something coming and hope that it will redeem their decisions from season 1.
Star Trek's got a good track record of bringing back good actors with good characters on a recurring basis when they found one. The Deep Space Nine, they did it with many characters, but John Delancey and Q is the one that sort of comes back to mind as a good example of that. And I think Lorca and Jason Isaacs is too good a combination not to bring back at some point.
Well, I agree. I'm pretty sure he will be brought back depending on his availability as an actor, but the way they described the transports in the episode, I read it as, Prime Lorca is dead because, they said Bran was under attack in the mirror universe. That's why he beamed up. Mm-hmm. And so I just, to me, Bran's under attack and the Klingons are probably just going to take him out. So, but
yeah, that's what I assumed too. But then it's like, well, we never saw the body. And
yeah,
it's like that. And then little mentions here and there. And then some of the chat on After Trek. I wonder. I had predicted early on that we were like Jason Isaacs wouldn't be here for the entire time. And of course, I was originally thinking, okay, well, we know that he's captain. He's going to die. And then Burnham's going to get promoted. That's not quite what happened. And we did lose Lorca, but I mean, he's just such a great character. And the fan base really loved him despite the fact that he was a bad guy.
Oh yeah, man.
Lots of upset when he died. So
Leather Jacket Lorca was amazing.
Yeah, if they're smart, they will find a way to bring him back.
I hope so.
Yeah, I want to see Captain Saru. They don't need to go to Vulcan and get a new captain. Just give us Captain Saru.
I agree with that.
He got his voice. He was awesome.
Yeah, seeing his evolution through the whole season was one of the high points for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I kind of struggled off and on with Saru because I didn't quite understand. I couldn't connect with him. didn't really understand it. And then my personal life took a turn, and I wound up in a place where I was experiencing a lot of fear and lack of control. And that has helped me identify with him more. And I've seen him, evolve from a very cautious, scared Kelpian, not person, Kelpian, into a very, courageous, brave, composed captain, in my opinion. I agree. There's no reason that Saru shouldn't be given the captain's chair for Discovery. And I hope that this diversion we may have with the Enterprise will get him there eventually. I guess we'll see.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Crossing. Gregor, did you have anything else for Spin It Again that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that's it. But coming back to Saru for a moment, one of the great things for me about the first half of the series was the Saru, the tension between Saru and Burnham. I thought that was fantastic, and in the episode that's got the Latin name, where they go to the planet and they get the frequency to break the Klingon code, the Klingon cloaking device. I think his breakdown at the end of that is fantastic, and really you get a real depth into where his psyche is and his nervousness and why he feels threatened by Burnham constantly.
Yeah.
And then after that, they were best pals. Whereas I think there should have been a slower transition towards close friendship. It just seemed to be, 1 minute there was, they were very guarded with each other, and then the next minute they were trusting each other with their lives. I just thought that happened too quickly.
I did kind of question once they were in the mirror universe and they both lied to each other when Saru asked if she had seen any other Kelpians, and she said no. And then he didn't really lie. He just didn't tell her about Culber's death. But I thought that was still interesting. And a lot of people were just like, well, they're protecting each other. Whereas I looked at it as them still hiding things from each other. So I didn't feel like there was one single resolution there with their relationship, but I definitely enjoyed what was there. And when we saw that episode, which was Sivis Pacum Parabellum, that episode was thanks. It was lauded as a Saru episode, and so I was thinking, oh, we're going to go to the Kelpian planet and we're going to learn all this stuff about Saru's past. And we didn't, and I was disappointed, but we did learn a lot about Saru and his life, living a life in fear, and what happens when you're able to find control. And I mean, unfortunately for Saru, he went kind of wacky, but looking back, I think that was a pretty powerful experience, both figuratively and literally, because again, we got to see how incredibly fast and strong Kelpians are. And anytime that happens, people are so shocked because they're like, what? He's that strong? But they are, and it's really cool to see that. All right. So actually not next segment. I was just going to pop over to Jeff. What are your standouts for Spin It Again?
Well, we already brought up the fact that they honored the deal and let Mirror Georgiou loose in the Prime Universe, but I have an even bigger problem than that. And from a military perspective, from an intelligence perspective, I could not understand how they let Tyler go. It did not make sense to me at all. He had access to so many potential secrets about the Spore Drive and Discovery. I was like, how could you just let him walk away? I mean, the Klingon War is just over. I mean, are we that trusting as Starfleet? Like, well, okay, they called off their fleet. We're safe now. Go ahead, Tyler. Go ahead. You killed a Starfleet crew member. You killed the Dr. Culber. He doesn't have to stand trial for that crime. He's absolved. And, just go ahead and live your life. Take all your Starfleet secrets with you to the Klingon Empire. It just felt so wrong to me that they just let him casually walk away. It's a huge intelligence hole there. I could not let that go. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I had a huge problem with that.
That's a great point. It didn't occur to me, but once you said it, it's like, yeah, how could they do something so stupid? Yeah,
exactly.
My only thought is that technically he's not Starfleet, right?
Well, they could have locked him up.
I mean, I don't disagree. I still just plain don't understand what happened. Like, I get sort of how they did the surgery and everything, and it was Voq transformed into a human being, but then L'Rell comes in with her special fancy gloves that I guess she was just packed, like had them in her pocket for when she needed them, does this surgery and I guess kills the identity of Voq.
I don't think it made any sense whatsoever to take a Klingon and then alter his body to make him look human so he could get past a medical scan, and then take the consciousness from a Starfleet officer and put him into that body. If you can move the consciousness, why not just put Voq's consciousness into Tyler's body?
Yeah. I think that's a pretty obvious one. I think that this is all. I mean, I've just always assumed this is going to play into the augment virus and genetic manipulation and have something to do with all of that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it turns out that L'Rell's plan was basically just to have Voq turn into a human, put him on Discovery, and I guess they were going to take over Discovery and steal the ship and that technology to help win the war.
It sure seemed that way.
Obviously, she got captured, and that didn't work out. The fact that he left with L'Rell, I really wish I had gotten, again, more of the backstory between the two of them, because obviously, so his memories of the torture were real. Like that was, or not torture, but the transformation, the surgery. Like originally it looked like it was just torture, but we know that it was a surgery. And now we know that the sexual assault was just sex between L'Rell and Voq. And I won't spend an hour talking about that and how that upsets me, because at the end of the day, I will say that, look, Ash still remembers those memories as assault, as torture. He still has PTSD. And so, he never asked for this to happen. So he is still a victim in some respect. And so I respect that. I just think it was really a bad decision to even have those scenes in there. But we didn't get any of the story between L'Rell and Voq and their supposed love affair. And I think that would have helped play in to Tyler's decision to leave, because he obviously was still somewhat attracted to L'Rell and had an affection for her, because when she said, "I'm no one," he stood up for her. And there's obviously something there. So I get it. And I'm sure we'll see them again, but I do agree with you, Jeff. Like there's no reason that they should have let him go or Georgiou go.
No. And I was thinking to myself after the episode was over, I mean, there's tons of stuff that we don't actually see happen in this episode. You go pretty much from the quote unquote end of the Klingon War, and you got the award ceremony. Everyone's getting their accolades. But we all know that Starfleet has some military aspects to it. And everybody on Discovery, had to get debriefed. Everyone got asked questions about what happened. Where were you the 9 months you guys were gone? And the story about Tyler actually being a Klingon is going to come out from at least a few of those people. And could you imagine Admiral Korn be like, wait, whoa. Where's this guy now? What happened to this guy? Wait, you didn't hold on to him? Like, why is he not? Why did you just let this guy walk away? Like, wait a minute, he killed Dr. Culber. He was a Klingon disguised as a human, and you guys just were like, okay, cool, go ahead, walk
And
away.
there's no real evidence that Voke is actually gone.
That's
either.
what I'm saying, exactly. I mean, he was still speaking fluent Klingon, and it was amusing to Klingons to see a human speaking Klingon. So obviously, he has full access to Voke and can embody Voke anytime he wants. Maybe she just fixed the surgery to make it so he could easily flip-flop back and forth whenever he wanted.
I don't know. I like Ash Tyler. I think he's a hot dish, and I like the character. Like if he never did any of this stuff and wasn't connected to Vogue, I would totally want to date him. But I really loved the scene last week where Burnham, just displayed her agency and took a step back and told him he needed to work on his stuff on his own, and that she wasn't going to be there for him while he worked everything out and do all that emotional labor. And then now, like, oh, we're gonna wrap things up, and so now she sees that it's Ash. And on one hand, I thought it was a sweet scene between the two of them. On the other hand, I'm kind of like, but really? Like, she's still obviously he's leaving, so she's not going to be there. She's not going to have to help him work through his stuff. He's going to go do his thing, and I assume work through his stuff with Laurel. But I was just kind of like, ugh, like, did we have to have that little resolution that way? Like, couldn't we have just had him, they hug and he leaves and she's like, good luck or something? I don't know.
Well, it just leaves us a lot of room for something in season 2, and we all agree that it was apparently a very boneheaded move to let him go.
Yep, for sure. All right, anything else that stood out, Jeff?
Just a couple little things. I know we were talking about fan service before. I did like Mirror Georgiou's reference to bread and circuses. I thought that was kind of nice. It was obviously kind of wedged in, but it was kind of cool. And speaking of Mirror Georgiou, I know that Eric had talked a little bit about the back and forth between Saru and Georgiou on the bridge with the eating Kelpians thing back and forth. But a bigger takeaway for me that I thought was interesting was that Mirror Lorca was able to fit in the Prime universe, but Mirror Georgiou totally was not. Even when she tried, she just could not pull that off. And I thought it was a kind of an interesting treatise on how much more easily Prime universe people can mimic, a mirror person in the mirror universe than vice versa. So that was kind of a cool juxtaposition for me.
Yeah, for sure. So before I forget to mention it, we had our TOS chat, music at the end when we saw Enterprise and everything. And anytime I hear that, it's like nerdgasm, and I do a little dance. So I was really happy to hear that. So that was one of the things that stood out to me. As I said earlier, I think that at the end of the day, this season was a lot more about Michael Burnham than it was the Klingon War. I think that Sonequa Martin Green has done an amazing job of bringing this character to life. Her acting is just... She was great in The Walking Dead, but this is just above and beyond. I think this is the best acting that I've ever seen from her. And on that note, I really have to give props to all of the actors involved in Discovery, because I think that this show would not have been as powerful or impacting without this cast. I'm not going to say that like this is the best cast of all of the casts of Star Trek or anything like that. But I think that the level of talent here, especially as seen in this first season, is something really remarkable and special. And so I think that all of the actors definitely deserve a standing ovation, although I'm not going to stand up right now. One of the things that really stood out to me in this episode was the relationship between Tilly and Burnham. and the fact that I mentioned on Twitter that every episode of Star Trek Discovery has passed the Bechdel-Wallace test. And I've talked about that before, and that's just basically that there are two women in a scene together, not talking about a man. And you'd be surprised of how many Star Trek episodes do not pass that test. It's kind of sad. So as a woman, I'm extremely proud that we have a Star Trek series in which every episode passes that test. And in this episode, especially, I felt that what we saw between Tilly and Burnham, with Tilly stepping in between Burnham and Ash and kind of making that physical separation, being protective of Burnham, and then pulling her aside on Kronos to just say, I know this is hard for you. I've got your back. Like that's real friendship between women. And those are moments that don't often get seen in television and in Star Trek. So that especially stood out to me. I'm trying to think if there are any other little things. I'm so glad that we finally know what those black badges were. Ha ha ha.
We do?
No, we don't.
Oh.
We don't. It's a
That's right. Yeah, I keep forgetting about those.
Yeah, I waited. I was like, come on, I want to know what they are. Maybe season 2. I don't know that we're ever going to find out what they were. But, you know, I loved the camaraderie that we saw in this episode. A lot of people felt that the scene where, you know, Michael suggested the mutiny and Saru stood up and said, we are Starfleet, and the entire crew stood up, was a bit much, but I liked it. I'm happy to see that in Discovery. And I thought the Burnham speech at the end, I mean, it was emotional. There really hasn't been a Star Trek that I've been able to watch, you know, live with all of you. The only opportunity I had for that was Enterprise, and I don't think any episode of Enterprise had me on the edge of my seat, you know, hands over my mouth, jumping around. It seems like a lot of people are having very, very visceral physical and emotional reactions to Star Trek Discovery. So if they were really going for a Game of Thrones style Star Trek, I think that they've succeeded in doing that. And in saying that, I think that overall, this is probably the best first season of Star Trek that's out there. So I applaud them for that. I think overall that everyone involved in Discovery, they're talented, they're great people. They seem to not only understand, but embrace the history, the ideology, the philosophy, and the family that is Star Trek. As fans that have been watching, you know, we know that there's fan service. There's plenty of fan service, but there's also a true effort involved in paying attention to the history that's there and trying not to go too far. I think that the people involved in Discovery truly respect Star Trek, and that's something to be grateful for. So that's kind of where I am gonna leave that, and we will go around the table to have, I guess, talk about any final words for the episode. So, Gregor, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just when you were talking there about Saru's near mutiny when he stands up and, you know, says, "I'm Starfleet." You know, I think Saru has had a couple of occasions in the second half of the season where he's really taken that lead, and I think it was in The War Within, The War Without, where he did the great speech, where he discovered that Lorca is in fact mirror Lorca, and he does the speech about this is not Lorca's discovery, this is our discovery. Yep. Which I think was really a message to the fans, saying, look, you know, we've taken you on this questionable journey in terms of Starfleet's ethics over the last dozen episodes or so, but no, it is Star Trek. It is going to be Star Trek, and it will be from here on in. And I think it has been. It's not every episode has been about the embodiment of Starfleet ethics and the Starfleet ethos or the Federation ethos. It's been about the journey getting there, and that was absolutely summed up in Burnham's speech at the end, because I think Starfleet's journey mirrored Burnham's journey through the season, culminating in that speech at the end of the awards ceremony. That's my thoughts on the ending of the season.
Absolutely. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, pretty much mirroring what you guys have said, in that, this series wasn't really about a war. The war was just a framework for character development, with the whole theme being, the duality of everyone from, Burnham's evolution, the Federation, how they go from, being the good Federation at the end to wanting to destroy the Klingons at the end to going back. So just even boiling down to the literal encapsulation of duality in going to the mirror universe. Mm-hmm. So it made for an interesting season. But, again, just the disappointing ending. And I think what really stands out, again, is the whole, like Gregor said, the ethics and ethos of the Federation, not being there. Let's destroy the Klingon race for our survival. That just feels so wrong to me. And I would just, I don't want to see my Federation stoop so low and go to that and have to be redeemed by one, quote, rogue crew, and save the day. Mm-hmm. But, it was good. So I use the word television. It was good television. I enjoyed it. I'm glad Star Trek's back, warts and all. It was a great ride. And, here's to season 2.
Awesome. What about you, Jeff?
So I think I'm going to hold off on my full review of the entire season, because I know we're going to do an episode of DiscoTrek really soon where we talk about our full opinions on everything that's gone on. But I'm going to throw really quickly back to something that I think you brought up, Heather, that we did not, this is something that I predicted from the earliest episodes of DiscoTrek that didn't actually come to pass, and we did not see the definitive end of the spore drive, just like you said. So we've got this kind of suspension of the spore drive where, well, we're looking for another way to do it, a more humane way to do it, but it hasn't been outlawed. It hasn't been removed from the ship. We've got no indication that Starfleet's scrapping the spore drive project in any way, shape, or form. So I'm still thinking, I'm hoping that's not the end of it. Like I feel like we need a definitive end. Being Star Trek nerds, all of us, we all hold on to all of these little things. And I think we all need some sort of a reasoning or a rationale behind why it will never be used again, since we've never seen it used again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And other than that, I mean, as a season finale, I know I rated it a B or B minus, and I think that's a fair rating. There were some really great parts of this season finale that I very much enjoyed, and like I said, it's not a season finale where I feel like I'm desperate to know the answers to what's coming up. It felt more like an optimistic season finale to me, where the inner Trek nerd in me, who's been along for the entire ride from TOS all the way through, is looking forward to what next season will bring. And I know we've kind of lamented a little bit on this episode about we don't necessarily want to revisit the adventures of the Enterprise, but what's up for the next season isn't necessarily a retread of what we've seen, since we've only really seen Pike's adventures in the cage. We don't know what happened between the time Pike took the helm and then Kirk took over. So, I think I'm up for a little bit of that. And, I am, for one, I'm hoping for a more familiar Trek next season. Not to say that Discovery for season 1 was bad Star Trek. I definitely enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ride. There were some really great high points in there. And I'm just looking forward to, what they're going to do next season as far as, kind of bridging the gap between where we are today and what we know in TOS.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as far as not diving into a full reaction, since we are going to talk about that. And there's a lot I want to say that I can't say in the few minutes that we have left. So I will leave it at this. Overall, again, I'm same page. I really enjoyed this season of Star Trek. just Star Trek, guys. It's not even Discovery, just Star Trek. I'm grateful to have Star Trek back on TV. I'm happy to pay for it. And I was very pleased with the return on my investment, I'll say. As far as whether I'm going to keep CBS All Access, that's to be determined. I'll probably keep it for, to be able to binge it one more time or something, or I might downgrade to the commercial version for a while. But the true spirit of Star Trek lives on because of us, because of the fans. We want more of it. And when we don't have it on TV, we are the people that I think are trying to embody the spirit of Star Trek and get to that future. And I thought it was really great that we came full circle with the torchbearer metaphor in Discovery, because I think that as fans, we are all the torchbearers. And that final speech that Burnham gave really resonated with me as a fan, because I do what I can every day to embody the ideals of Star Trek. I don't say Roddenberry anymore because it's not just Roddenberry. Star Trek is so much more than Gene Roddenberry. But this is the house that Roddenberry built that we're all very lucky to live on. And so I will be that torchbearer along with all of you. And we will light the way, and we will make it through this next year before we have more Star Trek, hopefully in 2019. So before we end the show, let's tell everyone where to find us in case they would like to continue talking about Star Trek Discovery. So Eric, where can people find you online?
I only exist on Facebook. I'm also the admin of maybe a cousin group of the unofficial group. I am the admin of the Star Trek Las Vegas USS Rio group page. So you can find me over there, or just under my name on Facebook.
Okay. And Gregor, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me under my name on Facebook. I also have a Twitter handle. It's at @CrabbitGinger, which is quite two Scottish words put together. And I'm also a member of Starfleet International, and I'm a crew member on the USS Alba. So anyone that's in Starfleet International listening to this can find me on the Starfleet database as well.
Awesome. Jeff, how about you?
Well, I am Warp Factor Jeff on Twitter, and you can find me as one of the administrators along with Heather and Jesse Akendo of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas Convention Facebook group, as mentioned earlier in this podcast.
Yep, so that's where I hang out. We are a positive Star Trek group. We're focused on the convention, but we do talk about other subjects throughout the year, and we try to make that group a safe space for everyone. Mm-hmm. So we welcome your constructive criticism and discussion of Discovery, but I'll be very honest, like, if you haven't watched the show, don't bother. Having said all that, you can find me on Twitter at LLAPOSPER, which is LLAPAWSPER. We are Disco_Trek on Twitter. And then you can find our show along with the rest of the Tricorder Transmission family at the tricordertransmissions.com. Jeff, I think we have one last thing to do before we head out. I believe we have a voicemail from last week's guest, Chris Booney. So do you want to go ahead and play that for everyone?
We absolutely do have it, and here it comes.
Hi, this is Chris Booney from last week's episode. I just wanted to call in and comment briefly on this week's season finale. I thought it was a very good finale, although I understand why it wouldn't be that wouldn't involve that much bash, boom, wallop, for good reason. I liked Burnham's solution to the entire situation, not only to the mission, but to the entire war. I liked that the war was resolved, that Morell was given power in a peaceful way, but still showing strength so that way she can persuade her people to retreat, saving the Federation. I also liked that Burnham was awarded for her dedication to Starfleet politics and ideals, and was exonerated for her actions earlier in the season, with her record expunged and a pardon fully acknowledged. So now we can call her Commander Burnham once again. In addition, it was very nice to see some very subtle original series nods in the wardrobing and also in that final shot. And I also felt like this was a nice way to end the season. Again, not as much Bash Boom Wallop, but then again, had that been the case, it would have been a far more expensive and far more bloody episode. So, for the time being, and in the interests of everything that is Starfleet, I'm glad that a peaceable yet agreeable situation was attained. Well, that's it for season 2. Have fun on the podcast, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Hear you out there. Bye.
Wow, that was really nice. And I think he brought up something that we didn't really talk too much about on this podcast, and that was the fact that Burnham has been completely exonerated and had her status in Starfleet restored. And that was something I think we debated early on in DiscoTrek, whether or not Burnham was going to be able to get back to her former status. Yeah,
not to mention that the moment with Sarek was really emotional. Ironically, that I love James Frain's Sarek. I think this is the most human Sarek that we've seen. But him calling her daughter, I was sitting there. I actually was sitting there like crying a little about Spock and feeling sorry for Spock because of this powerful relationship that Sarek obviously has with Burnham. I'm curious if we do wind up seeing Spock in season 2, what we may see between Sarek and Spock, and are they even talking right now? Timeline wise, I'm not sure if they're. I think Spock is still pretty. Yeah, I don't even know. I'm not good with all this timeline stuff. So
Spock is on the Enterprise, so that means he's kind of gone against his father's wishes and not gone to the Vulcan Academy. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So we'll assume at this point that they aren't speaking. So, I'm not opposed to seeing it happen. I just hope that not all of season 2 is this story with the Enterprise. But thank you, Chris, because that was a really great reminder to talk about that, and especially the moment between Burnham and Sarek. Eric, what did you want to say?
I'll be real brief and say that I guess I never brought it up because I always assumed from day one she would be vindicated and get her rank back. So it wasn't a surprise to me at all. It was a foregone conclusion in my mind.
Yeah.
And the final scene between her and Sarek, I kept watching James Frain's face because I swear he was smiling and smirking a lot in that scene. And I don't know if that was just me or if he really was, by purpose or by accident.
He looked happy. I think that there is. I'll have to go back and look. I felt so much joy and gratitude in that moment. There was just a lot of good feelings, and I think I do recall him at least looking happy, expressing that emotion. But I'll have to go back and watch.
I think he probably does. I think we forget that Vulcans aren't emotionless. What they do is they suppress their emotions, and they do come to the surface from time to time. And just on another point, what Chris said there about Burnham's redemption and her reinstatement into Starfleet, it sort of echoed the Vulcan, the old needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Well, and the case of what Burnham did in the last episode, it was the wiseness of the one was greater than the collective wiseness of Starfleet and the Federation put together, and she showed them the way. So I thought that was a good touch.
Very nice. Well, I think that wraps up our show. Thanks, Chris, for sending that wonderful voicemail. We would love to get more voicemails from all of you, so feel free to chime in. I guess that will do it. That is season 1 of Discovery. We'll be back next week with part 1 of our season retrospective. So until then, an Isaac for your thoughts. Live long and prosper.